Hello, Gene Schwimmer here. Welcome back. What do we talk about today? I think I'll just stray away from news events and just talk a little bit about Tennessee and New York. I just moved to Tennessee about a month ago, and no, that's not true. I moved in January, but time flies. I'm having so much fun that it seems like only yesterday that I moved here. What can I tell you? Number one, it rains all the time. I mean, all the time. Not every second, but it feels like all the time. And I mean just torrents of rain. I have never experienced anything like it. You're driving down the street and then suddenly thunderstorms and just rain just coming down in sheets. I hope it's not every year like that, but it probably is. That's Tennessee for you. That's number one. Number two is apparently in the South, or in this part of the South, on cars, using your signal lights is an option because people are always whizzing in front of me without signaling. I'm driving down the street and then on the highway, and then wham, some car just goes right in front of me. I even saw a county sheriff do that, go across 2 lanes without even signaling. The flip side of that is that on the street near my apartment, almost every week I see a policeman ticketing somebody. Maybe it's because they don't have a state income tax, so they have to get revenue from somewhere. So I'm starting to wonder if they're deliberately setting the speed limits 5 miles an hour below what they should be, so you can't help driving fast. I mean, it's really hard for me to drive 40 miles when it feels like I should be doing at least 45, or to drive 45 when I should at least be doing 50. The expressways, the speed limit is not 70, it's 65. And speaking of driving on the roads, I guess this would be the third item, is that the roads are really bad. Just driving down the road from my apartment to where, well, the Barnes & Noble where I like to hang out, I've almost got the potholes memorized, because you're driving and then just wham, you go right into a pothole. Or they had a pothole and they filled it, but I guess there's somebody with a mean sense of humor and they fill the potholes higher than the level of the road. You're driving and you go through a pothole, and then a few feet later, it's almost like a speed bump, like those speed bumps that you have in the parking lots to make you drive slow, but you're not driving slow. You're doing 40, 45, and you go right into this raised, whatever they fill the potholes with. So you go down like that, and you jolt you, and then up, and then you level, and then bang into one of these speed bump types overfilled potholes. And you get another bump. I've kind of got them memorized, so I know there's a bridge coming up, I've got to get over to the right lane because there's a pothole in the middle lane. But still, a pothole will get me, and I got to be careful. So that's Tennessee, if you're thinking of moving to Tennessee. But the good parts are, number one, everybody is super friendly here. If I had if I had 25 cents for every time somebody I don't even know asked me how I am, I could probably pay cash for my condo. Want to buy a cup of coffee, and they say, oh, how are you? And I say, I'm fine. I say, how are you? But I don't even know them. And that is different from New York, because I think I lived in New York. I mean, I lived in New York for over 40 years, and I can't think of a time when anybody asked me how I am. At least a stranger. Oh, and even people I know don't ask me how I am. Sometimes they do. So that's Tennessee. But I don't want anybody to get the impression that I don't miss New York, because I do. Some days I don't miss what New York has become, but I miss what New York was. And well, here, I miss this, and this, and this, and this. Got to hold back tears now. If you've never been there, there's just sometimes. I remember I went to a party in the early years. I was staying, before I had my own place, I stayed with a friend of mine that I've known for decades and decades. We grew up well, she was from Garden City, Michigan. She went to school, Wayne State University, which is where I went, and that's how I met her. And we've been friends for a long time. And she is an art director now, and she lives in Germany, actually, now, in Berlin. So talk about people leaving New York. She left New York. And, well, Woody Allen, believe it or not, that's the quintessential New Yorker. He no longer lives in New York. He moved a long time ago. He lives in Connecticut now. That shows you what's happening to New York. Anyways, getting back to my friend, she would take me, because she was an artist and she knew all these hip people and she knew all these other artists. I once got invited to, I guess you'd call it a soiree, just a gathering, a party in an apartment building. It was just east of Lexington Avenue in Midtown near Grand Central. And this was obviously, either they've been living there forever with rent control, or they were very successful, wealthy, whatever, because they had this apartment on a high floor. And I remember being at this party and going out on the balcony and just looking out over the city. These photos that I'm showing you, if you're actually there and looking at it, it's just that sometimes it just takes your breath away. It is so beautiful. And if I can put a little shout out for free markets as opposed to socialism, that beauty that you see, that was not designed. All these buildings that you see, they were all built individually by individual designers. They weren't trying to match the building next to them. They just bought the land and they built what they built just to meet the needs of their clients. The architects designed to meet the needs of their clients, but you look at the whole thing together, it's just beautiful. It's just gorgeous. And that's the secret of New York. You need a lot of money to live there. You need enough money to live in a beautiful apartment on a high floor where you can look out and see this view. And it's become impossible. That's why I had to leave. I was living in a little tiny apartment, a one-bedroom in Harlem. Well, that's what happened. I stayed with my friends, the one who lives in Germany now with her boyfriend. When I first moved to New York, I slept on her couch. That was down in the Village. That was by the Bowery. And then I had to get my own place, and that was up on 47th Street. I lived there for a few years, and then I got so poor. Believe it or not, the rent was $175 a month, which, I mean, that is just dirt cheap. And it was in Hell's Kitchen, now called Clinton, and it's called Clinton because they raised the rent, so they didn't want to call it Hell's Kitchen anymore. But that's what it was, Hell's Kitchen on the west side, near where West Side Story was filmed. So I lived there, and then I couldn't afford it, and I had to live in Long Island City, which is right across the East River from New York. It's one subway stop. And now that is expensive. And I was living actually in I was in a rock and roll band, and I had to sleep on the floor where the band rehearsed. That's how poor I was. But anyways, I eventually was able to get, I won't give you the whole story, but an apartment on East 95th Street. That was about $200 a month. Then a friend of mine, he was living on 89th Street. He got married. This is on the Upper East Side. He got married, moved to New Jersey. I took over his apartment for 2 years, and here's where it gets really crazy, if you want to know how crazy New York is, because they have rent control. So if you have to leave your apartment for a while, you're allowed to sublet your apartment for up to 2 years. Then you have to come back or you lose the apartment. So my friend moved to New Jersey. He said, do you want to live there? I figured, okay. So I took it. It was $600 a month, 3 times my $200 a month, but it was a big one-bedroom apartment. So I was staying in that apartment, and then eventually went up to about $900 over 17 years. But you see, I could only legally be there for 2 years. And I figured on moving, and I started looking for another apartment as my 2 years was running out. And I couldn't find one. I couldn't find one. I had a sectional sofa. I could not find an apartment that my sofa would fit into. So I decided to stay in my friend's apartment. And we just rigged up something where I pretended to be him, basically. That's what I had to do. He was in New Jersey, but he kept his checking account, and every 2 years he would, because, that's the other thing in New York, they can't evict you unless under the most extraordinary circumstances, like not paying rent forever. Or, as I said, if you overstay subletting your apartment, which is what my situation was. So I had to pretend to be him. So he would renew his lease for, you could either do 1 year or 2 years. He would renew his lease for 2 years, and then he would write me 2 years worth of checks and sign the checks, and then every month he had left his checking account at the local bank in Manhattan with no money in it. So every month I would put money in it, and then I would just send in one of his checks. I got away with that for 17 years, believe it or not, 17 years. And what happened was the owners of the building sold the building, and the people that bought the building, they hired a private detective and lawyers to investigate everybody in the building and see if anybody was there illegally, which was moi. So one day I come home, a nice sunny evening, well, not a sunny evening, the evening of a sunny day in August. I come home, I open my mailbox, and there are 3 letters, one to me, one addressed to my friend who was now living in New Jersey, and one addressed to his wife. And I called him up, and it turned out he got the same 3 letters. So what happened, they just did some research. I mean, it's not that hard because he has a Jersey license. It wasn't that hard. And they gave me, I guess, 6 months to move out, or they gave me 60 days to move out. So I had to look around, and I had the same problem. I could not find an apartment I could fit in. I finally found one, but it was up in Harlem around 7th Avenue and 145th Street. So you see the pattern here? You start in Midtown or down by the Bowery, and you're increasingly moving up and up and up and up and farther from the city as each area gets gentrified and becomes too expensive to live there. And that was my situation. I was on 7th Avenue and 145th Street. I happened to find a nice apartment. It took a long time to find it. It was so small that that couch I told you about, I had to leave it on the street, on East 89th Street in front of my apartment, and just about half my property, just about everything. Pretty much start all over. I moved up there. It was about October 2008 that I moved there, and the day came that I just realized that I would be there forever. Number one, if something happened and I lost that apartment, I would be homeless because I couldn't afford the rents anymore. If I'm not kicked out of the apartment, I would be homeless because I couldn't afford the rents anymore. And if I'm not kicked out of the apartment, I would still have to live in this apartment. Oh, and I meant to tell you, so what happened at 89th Street, my 1-bedroom apartment that I moved out of, I later ran into this nice lady who lived in the building, and she was there legally, so she was still there. And I said hi, and we exchanged pleasantries. And I said, whatever happened to my apartment? Did they rent it? And they said they turned my 1-bedroom apartment into a 3-bedroom apartment. They raised the rent from about the $990 I was paying to $3,000 a month, she told me. And I believe it. That is the situation, and that's why I had to leave. One of my favorite writers is a man named Kevin Williamson. He writes a lot for National Review. He was hired by The Atlantic, the magazine The Atlantic, to write a column, to present a conservative or another point of view. They fired him after one article. So there, that gives you an idea of the open-mindedness of liberals. There's an example right there. But anyways, he's in the same situation I am. He also lived in New York City, and I moved to Tennessee, he moved to Texas. Well, I'm going to read you, I'm going to quote, okay, this is Williamson talking, but this will give you an idea of what's happened to New York. My wife and I both are former residents of New York City, and on a recent business trip, there she was taking a nostalgic walk through the Upper West Side on a lovely fall day, talking to me on the phone about the possibility of moving back there. And then the crusty guy walking in front of her on the sidewalk stopped, dropped trow, and took a dump right there on the sidewalk on Central Park West. That's New York. Besides the expense, I just got tired of seeing homeless people. I got tired of getting on the subway, having to try 3 different cars to find one that doesn't have a homeless person sleeping in it, or being able to go into a Starbucks without a homeless person in front of it. It just got too much. One of the subway stations that I used to use occasionally, I read a story about they're finding hypodermic needles there now. In some of the parks where children play, they're finding hypodermic needles. They're putting up little metal drop boxes to drop your hypodermic needles that nobody's using. Crime is going up again. Actually, my apartment, a German tourist, a young woman, was pistol whipped a half a block from where I live. Somebody was shot right across from my apartment on the other side of the street. It just gets too much. You can't tolerate it after a while. You want to have a decent life, and you let things go a little bit and a little bit and a little bit, and finally the time comes when you just have to say, that's it, I'm leaving. Maybe if I had a lot of money, if I hit the big time, if I get millions of viewers to my vlog and I'm making tons of money, then I can move back and live in a beautiful apartment on a high floor, and use Uber to go everywhere instead of the subways, and maybe I'll enjoy it then. Oh, and no state income tax here. Business was slow last year, so I had to pay $800 in New York State and New York City state income tax, but the year before that I paid $3,000 in New York state income tax. So I'm saving $3,000 by being here, more than enough to go back and visit, especially with Airbnb now. I could, for $100 a night, I could fly in for about $350 round trip, and then I could stay in an apartment for a week, see everything I want to see, visit my friends, and then come back. And that's probably what I'll do. And that's it for today. So I'm going to sign off now. If you like this video, I hope you'll share it and do the thumbs up like thing. And if you don't like it, I hope you comment either way. If you don't like it, then, well, yeah, share it anyway if you don't like it. And say, boy, look at this crazy guy. Can you believe the silly things that he's saying? Watch this video. Okay, it's all good, and I really appreciate it if you take time to write a comment, and you don't have to agree with me. In fact, I prefer the ones where you don't agree with me, because I'd like to be able to talk about the comments on this vlog, and if somebody just agrees with me, then all I can say, oh, so-and-so write a vlog, and he agrees with me, and there's nothing more to say. So, well, that's it. It's hard to, I like you all so much, it's hard to say goodbye. And that's why I'm kind of rambling at the end, as I usually do. So I'm just going to cut it off and say, see you soon, and bye.